Hey, church, welcome to How to Read the Bible, a field guide for spotting Jesus in every book of the Bible. And today we're looking at Proverbs. So I would love to know what your favorite Proverbs are. I'll share mine. Favorite proverb that's not necessarily from the Bible, although you can make a case for it. But I had a boss one time who said that a job half done is a job not done at all. And I will never forget that. And around my house, you could probably hear me share that one with my kids every once in a while as well. We're talking about Proverbs today, the book kind of in the middle of the Bible right after Psalms. So let's jump right in. With Proverbs, if you're in a group setting, this is a great time to take a look at whatever you know about Proverbs. Maybe you have some favorite ones of your own. Who's in it or who wrote it? When did it happen? What do you know about it? Hit pause now. The theme of Proverbs, don't want you to miss it, is about living well in God's world, which is important because Psalms, the book of the Bible immediately before, is all about living in right relationship with God. And then Proverbs right after that is how to live in right relationship with God's creation, how to live in the world. And so Proverbs is chock full of just how to live well in the world, and living according to God's intent is, of course, a part of that. You can kind of imagine the author here of Proverbs saying, hey, listen, a car works best when it's filled with oil. You run out of oil, you don't put it in there. If you don't change your oil, like bad things start to happen, right? And it's just following along in the instruction book. That's what Proverbs is all about. A proverb is just a short, clever saying that offers wisdom. There's lots of proverbs in the world. That saying that I shared earlier about a job half done is a job not done at all, or a shoddy craftsman blames his tools. Those are proverbs, right? What's yours? Drop in the comment section below. I have some of my favorites. They're listed out here. I just highlight those for you. I like to go to the ant, you sluggard. It's so harsh. Maybe we should bring that one back. Observe her ways and be wise. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will, not property. And I did this one from memory, not cut and paste. And poverty will come upon you like a thief, right? Where you just like, hey, just relax. And that's not just about like farming or even work in general, but any area of life. You just like back off the pedal just a little bit and like it's done. It's over. I think about some of your relationships, or you think about friendships, or you think about your work life. Just pull back just a little bit and all of a sudden it's gone. At least that's what it feels like. The book of Proverbs, these collections of sayings, you think that it's all just these collections of sayings. There's 31 chapters, and sometimes you see like, hey, there's 31 days in a lot of months, and there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. So like read one chapter of Proverbs every single day. But the problem with that is that there's not actually 31 chapters of these wise, clever sayings in Proverbs. In fact, almost all the Proverbs are located in chapters 10 to 29. So let's take a look at what else is in the book of Proverbs, because there's a lot more going on in Proverbs than just that. So kind of an outline. Proverbs 1-9 starts off with an introduction, and there's like this link to Solomon. You guys remember him? Solomon was a great king in Israel's history, the third king, in fact, David's son. And there's this cool wisdom story where God says, hey, listen, I'll give you whatever you want. You just name it. What is it? And Solomon says, I'd like not wisdom or fame, I'd like wisdom. And this is Book of Proverbs is some of his collected work. He amassed massive amounts of wisdom from all over the world. He was a collector, in fact, of wisdom. And this is kind of where Israel's wisdom tradition even began. It began from Solomon. And the point of Proverbs is saying that wisdom wasn't just limited to Solomon. Like you and I, we can have access to this wisdom as well. In fact, he wrote it down. You got the sense like it's a father to his son. He wrote it down just so that we could have this wisdom. Thank you, James, for weighing in. Early is on time is late. Yes! Oh, I love that. I admit I am like habitually exactly on the money on time. And it's not good. I like that. Early is on time. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, James. Hebrew. The Hebrew word for wisdom is shakma. And that's more than just knowledge. It's really action. It's applied knowledge. I think this is kind of cool that in the book of Exodus, the artists and the craftsmen are referred to as somebody who embodied or somebody who had this shakma. They had applied wisdom or applied knowledge. It had a certain kind of skill to it, and it was action. For the biblical authors, and Solomon in particular, just knowing something was never just good enough. It was all about applying that, doing something. And if you're like 100% honest in any area of life, just knowing something is never good enough, right? You have to do something with that knowledge. If you know something, like, good for you. What's the point? I mean, I hope you feel better about that, but it doesn't actually move the needle for the people around you, for the world around you. So these are practical skills for living well in God's world. So we have, starting right off the bat, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of this shakma. Like, that's where it all starts. This applied wisdom, knowledge, skill comes from God first. So it makes sense that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of this. But it's not fear like terror, not afraid as much as it is a reverence or of an awe, a recognition of our own mortal standing before God and coming before him with humility instead of pride. So Proverbs starts off in chapter 1 through 9 with these 10 speeches from a father to a son. I'm going to underline that one. That's important because it's going to end with a saying from a mother to her son. And so it's cool that it's a father to his son. To start off with, because it kind of provides this like bookend on the whole thing, which we'll get to in just a minute. So these 10 speeches to a father for the son, and really he lays out two main points: that wisdom, virtue, integrity, generosity all lead to success and peace. Folly, evil, selfishness, pride, these things all lead to ruin and shame. That's what the father wants his son to know. And honestly, like, that's what any parent wants their kids to know. Right? Like even today, we'd say like, yeah, I want so badly my kid to get that. In addition to the 10 speeches from a father to a son, there's also these 4 poems from Lady Wisdom. These 4 poems, every time people make a wise choice, they're drawing on Lady Wisdom. So there's like these poems saying, hey, listen, every time somebody acts with integrity, every time somebody acts with generosity, every time somebody tells the truth, every time somebody follows the line, works hard with this wisdom that's embodied into the world, it's like they're drawing on, and the author here kind of says like that Lady Wisdom thing that's embedded in. Now, the biblical authors are not making a case for there being some kind of goddess in addition to their God. No, this is a literary device, right? This is poetic language, right? But the point is that God has embedded this wisdom right into creation, this way of living, or you could even say this rhythm of living right into creation. It's like there's a rhythm, there's a cadence, there's a melody of how to live well. And the biblical author is saying, listen, sometimes we work hard and we hit it and we follow along with that melody, and it leads to a more beautiful life. Other times we just stumble upon it and kind of come into it and out of it again, and we don't really know why it works better sometimes and else other times. And sometimes we don't follow along at all, and life is just very, very difficult, and it kind of is a cacophony. I like we've got more comments. My dad always says, Stacy, if you want to have a good time, you got to be a good time. I like that. It says a lot about us as kids and our attitudes in different situations. Yeah. Quit waiting for somebody else to make you happy. That comes from inside. I like that. Thank you, Stacy. So we've got these 10 speeches from a father to a son. We've got these 4 poems of Lady Wisdom about creation is embedded into creation. Surely be generous with praise, cautious with criticism. That is gold, Shirley. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring that one home. I actually keep a list on my phone of all of these like just sayings that I say to my kids a lot, and some of them are our Sunday takeaways as well. And those are Proverbs, right? That we come to again and again and again. All right, so the goal here, the father to his son is saying, make wisdom your pursuit in everything that you do. The middle part, the second part that Proverbs is famous for is these clever sayings, these proverbs. And there's a huge variety of proverbs, right? And they cover everything from marriage, generosity, poverty, work, family, friendship, forgiveness, the use of alcohol, debt. I mean, like, you could make a case to say that all of life is covered. Every area of life is addressed by Proverbs 10 to 29. I mean, and they're short and they're pithy and they're very memorable. They're meant to come back to again and again and again and again. But this cannot be overstated, is that these Proverbs are more about probability than promises. These are statements that are generally true. They're not promises that if this happens, then this happens. Probably the most famous example is that it's train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't turn from it. Proverbs 22:6. That's generally true. But again, it's about probabilities, not promises, right? You can't look at a wayward child who walks away from God or God walks away from wisdom and makes bad choices and immediately draw the line to the parents. Like, you can't do that. That's not how Proverbs are meant to be used. The proverb is meant to be used to talk to those parents when they first have the child and say, hey, listen, bring them up now. Like, you're a parent now. You're creating a culture. You're creating an expectation right now. And do this work right now so that when they're old, they won't walk away from it. Don't wait, do it now, right? That's how Proverbs is meant to be used. There's no guarantees, but they're generally true. Now, of course, there's exceptions to this. There's exceptions to every rule. And what I love about studying the Bible is how real and how raw that it is. Even included in the Bible, we have the exceptions included, namely Job. I mean, Job had all these terrible things happen to him, even though he was a good guy. He was a righteous guy. And we get the sense that he lived a life according to these Proverbs, and such calamity fell upon him. That's included in the Bible. The Book of Ecclesiastes is another book that describes Solomon in his later age saying, hey, listen, I've seen some of these things not work out, and I'm just gonna own that, as sometimes, even though you do the right thing, life just kind of stinks. And it's not fair. Like, you're right. And the Bible, God's work, God's story, owns that and says you're absolutely right. Someone is going to need to make it right. It's pretty cool. Okay, wrapping up Proverbs 30 is this guy, Agur. He kind of comes out of the middle of nowhere and says, like, wait, who's this guy now? Oh, I don't know. But he begins by acknowledging his own folly, but then he recognizes that wisdom is available. And so Agur kind of functions as a model for all of us, right? Solomon is imparting this wisdom, and as Agur is this guy who says, I'm a brute. I don't have any wisdom. Oh, I can have wisdom? That sounds great. Let's apply that, right? So Agur is meant to be a model for all of us. And then we have this mostly misunderstood Proverbs 31 chapter where we have Lemuel. And Lemuel begins Proverbs 31 by recalling the wisdom that his mother taught him, which, remember, is a direct reference to the beginning of the book of Proverbs, where we see a father imparting this wisdom to his son. It ends with a mother imparting this wisdom to Lemuel, a son. So it's kind of functions as the bookends of Proverbs. And what Proverbs is probably most famous for is the Proverbs 31 woman, which is actually words from Lemuel. Proverbs 31 woman is an acrostic, which is like every letter in the Hebrew alphabet stands for something different about this wise woman who takes on God's wisdom and actually lives it out. And her husband, the poor in her community, her customers for her own business, the community at large, and her children, like, all take note of just how stunning wisdom is lived out. Now, it's probably a reference to lady wisdom, that's and not like a specific woman, but the lady wisdom that's embodied into all of creation, now personified actually as a human being. But fellas, let me talk to you guys right now for a minute. Just because there's a Proverbs 31 woman does not get us off the hook for living out that kind of life. The work ethic that she embodies, right? Getting up early to sell her wares, right? The work ethic, the fidelity within her marriage and commitment to her kids and her community. Like all of these things are the wisdom that God has put in creation. And it's personified as a woman because the word for wisdom is a feminine word in the Hebrew language, so it just made sense and sounded good to personify her as a woman. But that applies to God too. That applies to men too, and we know that because Jesus embodied lady wisdom, right? And it's not saying that that was a feminine thing that Jesus did. It's not feminine or masculine. It's true, and it's a life well lived. A summary of the entire book of Proverbs is it opens with a son about listening to lady wisdom, and it ends with a mother to her son about a woman who lives wisely. It's this cool book of Proverbs. This book ended very, very well, and it's obviously very intentionally written. If I had to put an entire summary on it, Proverbs is simply a guide for living well in the world. So where do we spot Jesus in a book about living well? On the basis of Proverbs, remember, like there's this sense of which Proverbs says like creation just doesn't happen in a vacuum, is that there's a cadence, there's a rhythm, there's a melody behind creation of how to live well. And when we follow that melody, it seems like life is easier. It's not only easier, it's filled with more meaning, it's filled with more depth, it's filled with more beauty. And the Proverbs, this collection of sayings, is how to live within the melody of creation and live that meaningful, deep, beautiful life. Well, Jesus is the personification. Jesus is the actual historical figure of what it means to live a life along with the melody of creation itself. Jesus is Proverbs wrapped in flesh and lived out. Now, living and loving for us, living and loving like Jesus means that we start to live more in line with God's melody for a full, deep, beautiful life. The purpose is for us to arc our life into the life of Jesus so that we just start to live out the Proverbs naturally as Jesus himself did. For the week ahead, I thought this would be cool. Go ahead and pick out a proverb to write out this week. Write it out, print it out, whatever it is. Repeat it several times every day and see how it challenges you, encourages you to live differently. And this is a few of my favorites. We've got one on generosity, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. We've got a proverb on the words of reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. We've got a word about conflict. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. A word on plans. Commit to the Lord whatever you do. He will establish your steps. Humility. Pride goes before destruction. A haughty spirit before the fall. Friends, don't speak to fools, for they will scorn your prudent ways. Right? Don't even talk to them. Don't hang out with them. And then work. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Observe her ways and be wise. One of my favorite ones. Ants doing so little at a time but accomplishing so much. That kind of feeds into the thing we say at Encounter from time to time about how you will greatly overestimate what God will do in the short run, but you will likely overestimate what you can do in the short run while dramatically underestimating what God will do with a lifetime of faithfulness. All right, here's some group questions. If you're watching this alone, this could be like reflection questions. If you're watching this in a group setting, I'll leave them on the screen here for a little while, and you can go ahead and talk about them as a group. Don't forget to hit pause. I want to thank everybody who dropped a comment. That's really cool, just doing this in community and in life together. Really appreciate this study. I personally get a lot out of just studying God's Word together and seeing some of these big themes throughout the whole Bible. It's pretty neat. All right, guys, thanks for dropping by. I'll see you every Wednesday at noon.